Hello, this is Paul Chek. Today I thought I would share guidelines for intimate relationships. Today what I'm going to share with you is something that I learned studying the work of Arnold Patent. Some of you may have seen me refer to his universal principles on previous video blogs. And if you're interested in Arnold Patent's excellent work, I highly recommend you go to www.arnoldpatent.com. He's got some great books, and his universal principles are something I've used regularly in my life and in my coaching practice. I chose the topic today because as a man with 32 years of experience training athletes, coaching athletes, working as a holistic health practitioner, and dealing with almost every kind of challenge you can imagine that people have, both as athletes and as people with health challenges and life crisis challenges, I can assure you that there's often stress due to challenges in intimate relationships, be it boyfriends, girlfriends, lovers of different types, spouses is very, very common. And then also there's challenges within family dynamics that are often very linked to the stress that leads to illness and disease and performance challenges in non-athletes and athletes alike. So I wanted to share the 3 steps that Arnold Patent gives with reference to how to cultivate a successful, long-term intimate relationship. Now, these suggestions from Arnold Patent, we must remember, come from a very, very wise, very mature man who lived a lot of life. And I can tell you, because I've broken all of these rules many times, that one comes to this type of an opinion after a lot of life experience, and that when you're younger, your youthful exuberance and your need for immediate gratification is often much stronger than your sense of wisdom or forethought or even concern for the future. We are, shall we say, very, very dangerously similar to chimpanzees and bonobos and other creatures in the genetic tree that are very close to us with their sexuality and their behavior. So there's a real reality to the animal instincts in us and the animal needs in us, shall we say, the animal element in us, and the human element that rises up above our instincts and our urges to become a witness to what we've created through acting out that animal nature in the past and how that's challenged us. And we reach a point where we realize that sometimes the instant gratification creates challenges that may take years and years or a lifetime to get over. For example, in your youthful exuberance, you might go right to intimacy, end up getting pregnant or getting somebody pregnant, and that can cement you into a relationship that will be with you for the rest of your life. And if you ignore the relationship, in other words, walk away from it or blame it on the other person, you can't deny the ties that you have to that other individual and the child. So as we mature and look back, we can see that some of our mistakes were not only painful to us, but they created situations, for example, for a child who now is in a broken relationship without 2 parents and is often confused about why did mom leave me or dad leave me, may have issues of abandonment. So there can be a lot of painful things that sometimes the ego doesn't want to look at or appreciate. And so I think that even if you're young and your animal nature is still strong enough that this sounds like old folks' wisdom, there's nothing like awareness to keep under your hat and meditate on it and use it when the time is right, and just be aware that by listening to this presentation, you will have more appreciation for what your options are and have more of a likelihood of not getting yourself into trouble that will follow you around like skunk stink for the rest of your life. So let's take a look at Arnold Patent's 3 stages for developing a healthy, intimate relationship. Stage number 1, Arnold Patent refers to as the friendship stage. Stage 2 is what he refers to as the relationship stage. And then stage 3 is the intimacy stage. So in essence, what Arnold Patent is saying is that before you become sexually intimate with somebody, you should first identify whether or not you even have a friendship with that person. And then you should be aware that a friendship does not necessarily always create a good relationship. And intimacy with someone that you don't have the shall we say, the grounds for a healthy relationship or a healthy friendship is what tends to open Pandora's box and leads to plenty of problems. Now, as I said earlier, I've coached countless people who are having health problems and performance problems as athletes or business people due to challenges in these types of intimate relationships. And there's some common questions that come up. So I would like to help each of you interested in this topic to identify some of the key markers of each of these stages so that you have a better understanding of what that means. What's the difference between a friendship and a relationship, and how does that relate to being intimate? So some of my tips in this regard are, when it comes to friendships, friendships are usually created between people that have mutual interests. There's something that you share with that person. It might be that you're both interested in high performance cars, or in knitting, or in maybe you're part of a group for mothers and you have a real passion for raising children. I've watched many people in my lifetime meet each other in the waiting room of a doctor's office or a physical therapy clinic where I spent many years working. And because they both had back pain, they might develop a friendship on that common experience that they're going through. So friendships usually tend to build around mutual interests, not always. I've become friends with enemies. Sometimes enemies can become friends. I remember when I was in school, when I was probably in about the 10th grade, a friend of mine, well, he's a friend now, but at the time he was like my arch rival in sports, and we had this kind of deep-seated, almost gang-like hate for each other. And then one day we got into a big fight, and we both had such reverence for each other for how strong and tough the other one was, that we finally figured out it was easier just to be friends than to continue to beat the hell out of each other. So sometimes friendships can really begin in unusual ways, but we had sort of an unusual mutual interest, and that was being the alpha male. So there you go. Sometimes the polarity can be north on north, but you can get something out of it. So mutual interest, mutual sharing. Here in my PPS lessons, I talk about what's called a lock and key fit. Mutual sharing means that you may not necessarily have mutual interests, but you might have something mutual to share. So for example, I have friendships with medical doctors, and in general, my approach is so radically different than most medical doctors that there's not really a lot of harmony, because as soon as I start talking, oftentimes they get triggered and blah, blah, blah. But there is often a case, you know, there was a point I had like 36 medical doctors, not only referring me business, but a huge amount of them as patients with all their health problems. And so what happened was through a mutual sharing, discussing, you know, Paul, why are you doing it this way? And I would be asking, well, why do you guys continue to do this or to do that? Or what's your motive for corticosteroids? Or why would you do a laminectomy without first, you know, activating the core and, you know, blah, blah, blah. But what you find is that there's a lock and key fit. So the key is yang and the lock is yin. So there's you know, a relative complementary opposite, medical doctor holistic health practitioner, rehabilitation specialist, very different approaches, but we need each other. So, you know, I have a lock and key fit with my wife, Penny, for example. She's very scientific minded, quite academically endowed, very good writer, very good at computers, very good at things that aren't really that exciting and interesting to me, but we both have a mutual interest in sharing holistic health with the world. So we support each other because there's a lock and key fit. In many ways we see the world very differently, but because we have this mutual dream together, we're able to take advantage of each other's strengths and weaknesses, and so it created a very beautiful friendship. And I have many friendships that you could call that lock and key fit. So there's a mutual sharing, which doesn't necessarily mean that you agree eye to eye on everything, but there could be a lock and key fit where their opposition creates awareness, information, and the capacity for both of you to expand, and that can make a friendship quite fun. Then when you're in the friendship stage, especially if you're exploring a relationship you think might head for intimacy, you want to look to see what are that person's virtues and vices. Virtues are the things that they tend to do well, usually quite naturally. So timeliness is a virtue, reliability is a virtue, trustworthiness is a virtue, to be loving is a virtue, to be graceful is a virtue. Each virtue has a vice. Reliability has the vice of unreliability. Timeliness has the vice of tardiness. So you can go through, loving has the vice of not loving or being indifferent. So whenever you're in the friendship stage, you're in that initial exploration stage that is very, very necessary, because if you don't go through these explorations, you can end up in a relationship with someone that you don't really know, and therefore you can end up having some challenging relationship problems. And if sex gets involved in these premature stages, then as I share in my audio program, there are two kinds of sex. Which are you having? Sex can become not grease that facilitates a relationship, but it can become glue that binds you together, because maybe you're sexually needy, maybe you're not capable of taking care of your sexual needs yourself, or you don't have confidence in yourself, and all of a sudden now somebody's, shall we say, scratching an itch for you. But as I say to my students and clients, there's sex, and then there's 23 hours a day you've got to deal with that person. So we want to be careful to look at these stages, because if sex gets involved before you figure these things out, sex has a very, very strong binding power for most people, and in general it's a stronger binding force for a woman than a man. Most men use their penis like a tool. You use it, you clean it off, you put it away, and you look to see where you can do Mother Nature's work again. We don't have so much shall we say, inherent attachment to the use of our pleasure tool. But women have a lot more responsibility, because they're the ones that get pregnant, and there's a lot of complexities for a woman about, she doesn't, in other words, if she starts acting like a man, her risk of raising a child that may be fatherless and may put her under tremendous stress and leave her with all sorts of challenges in families, in religions, and everything else is pretty high. So we want to be wise about the use of sex in these different stages, because it can create bonding that can be so strong that your own ego doesn't understand it, and you can find yourself in a relationship asking yourself, why do I keep doing this? Why do I keep having sex with this person that drives me friggin' crazy? And eventually you get to the point where you realize that you need help, or you just continue to have that kind of a relationship. It goes off like a bomb, and then you find yourself in another one, and then you got a whole string of them behind you, and then you lose confidence in yourself, and you lose confidence in people, and you can end up becoming a depressed and eventually apathetic person. So friendship opens the door to relationship. Relationship is distinguished, as I see it, from friendship by the fact that there's more reliability. One of the analogies I give my clients when I'm coaching them is you typically don't ask somebody that you don't have a relationship with to pick you up early in the morning to get you to an important flight at the airport. Because if you've got to make that flight and you don't know whether or not that person's reliable or responsible or even has a car that's reliable, and all of a sudden they show up an hour later, forget to pick you up, it puts a lot of stress on you, and it can lead to a lot of conflict in a supposed friendship that could be damaging. So that's just an analogy. You wouldn't give the key to your house to someone you just had a friendship typically without some kind of a relationship, because you don't know if they're reliable. You haven't had enough exposure, enough life experience with them to turn over the key to your house. You know, you don't want someone partying in your house or things like that, or tearing the place up. So these are just little signifiers. So are they reliable? Look at issues of trustworthiness and the duration of contact. You can't really know someone at the level of a relationship if you've only known them for a couple of months. The child in you may think, oh, I know them, they're great, whatever. But, you know, the adults out there know that many people that we thought were our friends turned out to be people that became very dangerous in our lives and very challenging. Now, if you're moving toward an intimacy and relationship, and that's your dream, maybe to find a life partner, someone to have a child with, or just to have a beautiful relationship with, then you want to know they're reliable, you want to know they're trustworthy, you need to spend enough time to get to know them, otherwise you don't really have a relationship, you're just having a fling, and that's back to the chimpanzees and the bonobos again. But some of the things I would encourage you to look for if an intimate relationship is ultimately your goal is investigate politely and not so obviously, what are their parental likes and dislikes? In other words, ask them, what is it that you love most about your mother? What do you love most about your father? And what drives you the nuttiest about your mother? And what drives you the nuttiest about your father? Those are the things that you want to know. Why? Because your parents are the ones that program you. And paradoxically, the things that drive you nuts about your parents usually turn out to be the very things that people complain about you in relationships, but usually you're in denial or you're completely ignorant that you also carry those behaviors. And oftentimes we get reactive towards people that act too much like us in our presence because we can't actually realize, or we don't realize, that we're looking at the parts of ourselves that are still out of balance, broken, or in need of awareness. We're only aware of them when we're around our mother or our father or other people, so we project those qualities of ours onto the person. You talk too much, or you're too much of a perfectionist, or you're this or you're that. But it's very interesting when I do relationship coaching, which is quite often, I ask people to write down first early in a session, what are the three or four most common reasons people have broken up with you in relationships, whether it be intimate relationships, business relationships, etc. What were their most common complaints? And then usually I wait a session or two, and then I say, write down the three things that drive you the most crazy about your mother and you're most crazy about your father. And then I pull out a little surprise. I go back to what we wrote down 2 lessons ago and notice what people wrote down and have complained about you in relationships and what you just wrote down about the things that drive you nuts about mom and dad. And they often fall completely out of their chair when they see that the exact same things that people said were reasons they got out of relationships with them, or what they wrote down about the things that drive them nuts about their parents. So the point here is, if you're going to get into an intimate relationship with someone and your intention is to have a healthy intimate relationship, it might be wise for you to figure out where your work is going to be. And the work is usually going to be in dealing with the qualities in that person that they often deny in themselves but can recognize in their mother, their father, or even in their siblings. And you should look carefully at those qualities in yourself. You don't have to look at them until you've looked at them in your parents, and then they're easy to find in most instances. And if you find things there that already are triggers for you, well, one, you know where your work is. But remember, if you have that quality yourself, let's say you like to talk too much and be the center of attention, but your potential partner also likes to talk too much and be the center of attention, you can find the two of yourselves warring for attention whenever you're with other people, other groups, etc. There's just a small example, and you can end up going home wanting to put the boxing gloves on, not get in bed. You might even not get the gloves on. So these are very important. And then when we get down to the intimacy level, what we're finding is that what we learn here at the friendship stage and in the relationship stage ultimately helps us define our core values as they may relate not only to ourselves but to being in relationships. So what are your core values? And once you know what your core values are around things like religion, philosophy, diet, quiet, movement, what makes you happy, all the things I teach in the 4 Doctors and the PPS lessons, then you know whether or not you're likely to be compatible with someone, because you can do what I call a we tree. You evaluate your core values against their core values, and then you say, well, if we're going to be in a long-term relationship of any kind, where are we going to have to compromise? For example, you might find your prospective partner likes to play his guitar or her guitar or instrument till late hours of the night, and you need to sleep because you get up early in the morning. So if you can't make a compromise there, all the intimacy in the world's not going to help, because when you start getting sleep deprived and your headaches and you can't think straight and you got to go to work as a policeman or a doctor or an auto mechanic or whatever you might be, your life's going to start falling apart. So the friendship and the relationship allow you time to explore your core values and explore their core values. Then you take your core values down and you ask yourself, is intimacy with this person going to be grease in the relationship and make what's already working well even more fun and more exciting and flow more smoothly? Because sex does have a very, very powerful healing ability, nurturing ability. It helps you go deeper with people. It helps you stay connected when times get tough because you harmonize with that person. It even opens your intuition to the other person, sometimes very, very deeply. I've had many amazing and beautiful experiences of intuitive harmony with someone that came by sexual union. So you want to ask yourself, if I get into an intimate relationship with this person that was once my friend that now I'm in a relationship with, is it going to be grease or glue? And a lot of the answers will come right up here when you start exploring core values and parental likes and dislikes. And once you hear those dislikes, then you need to pay close attention to how much of that's present right in front of you. And the more of it there is present, yet unconscious in that individual, the more booby traps you have. And then you need to do that for yourself. Otherwise, you're always going to be seeing what's wrong with them, but not knowing your work, where your work is. Also, whenever you have sex with someone, it significantly increases expectations. This is one of the problems when you have sex with friends. If you have sex with friends, or a lot of sex with friends means almost anybody at this stage, meaning a lot of people think someone's their friend because they met them 2 hours ago in an airport, especially males. So if you are having sex with people that are only at the level of friends, you can get yourself into some real entangled challenges because there's a lot of expectations that come, especially when a woman opens herself to a man. There usually is a bonding force that the man ignores or doesn't want to see until the, shall we say, the black widow starts weaving her web around you. Not that I'm picking on women at all. Just the woman's nature is to, shall we say, make sure she's going to get what she wants at an unconscious level. She wants to know that somebody's going to support her if a child gets involved, and women have their needs and men have their needs. So the key thing I'd like to point out under expectations is before you have sex with anybody, whether you're following these rules or not, is you should get very clear on what are the expectations. In other words, if I have sex with you, does it mean that I now have to send you an email every day? Do I have to call you twice a day? Do I have to give you flowers? Does it mean that, you know, you have access to my intimate life, to my personal life, to my money? You'd be amazed at what a lot of people assume sexual interaction means in any culture in the world. There's a lot of things that are unwritten, but individuals can have very different perspectives of that. So if the expectations are not clearly identified prior to going into an intimate experience, then you are basically just playing with relationship dynamite, and it leads to lots of problems. And I'm not against the problems, just so you know. We've all got to learn, and rules and ideas like this, like I said, they're usually the fruits of a lot of mistakes made by people that become wise people after making all those mistakes. But there's nothing like awareness, right? If you're driving down the road and you pull over at a gas station and someone says, oh, by the way, the storm blew trees across the road and it's very dangerous driving down that road right now, at least you're aware that if you're going to keep driving, you've got to be careful. But if you get that kind of a warning and then you keep driving at double the speed limit while smoking pot and drinking beer in the car, then you're acting the same way that someone jumps into sex blindly and only finds out later that there was all sorts of booby traps, but now they're somehow glued to that person. And next, and very important, is birth control. You know, there are natural methods for birth control, and I can tell you, you do have to be careful using them, and there's also a lot of risks with chemical birth control, such as the pill. There's risks to all the sort of commonly traded forms of birth control, health risks largely, and the risk of natural birth control is that sometimes it doesn't work. And I'm talking to you right now as a 54-year-old man that's about to be a father again, when he never ever expected that that was going to happen, because Angie and I were monitoring cycles very, very carefully. But without going into a long explanation, there are things that can happen that can throw cycles off, that can throw timings off, and a healthy man's sperm can hang around and party down there for 2 or 3 days. So you got to be really, really careful. So as a general rule, if you don't have assurance of birth control and you're going to have sex and you don't know what woman's cycle is or where she's at, then you are rolling the dice. And if you hit the jackpot of her getting pregnant and you're happy about it, then you hit the jackpot. But if pregnancy comes and it's not wanted and the timing's not right, it can lead you to having to make very, very tough decisions that can go right to the very, very core of your heart and soul, such as an abortion. And that can be something that can change your life forever when you have to end a life. So these are mature issues that are often not explored by immature people until they're in a lot of pain. And as I said earlier, now you have a child in a broken family that can grow up to be a very broken person. So that's my summary of Arnold Patent's 3 stages or guidelines for developing healthy long-term intimate relationships. Areas where I have covered information that I think you would find very, very supportive in context with our discussion today. Again, the audio, there's 2 kinds of sex. Which are you having? That's at ppssuccess.com in the audio section. PPS Lesson 1, How to Find and Live Your Legacy, because I show you how to look at the challenges in your life and identify a lot about who you are and what you need at this time in your life. Lesson 2 is self-management. You know, a real habit people have is they're always hoping for Mr. or Mrs. Right to come along, and they have a whole long laundry list of all the things that make that person perfect, but they often overlook the fact that that person's also looking for Mr. or Mrs. Right. So as I say to all my clients and students in this regard, become the person you're dreaming of, and then you will see them when they're right in front of you. So PPS Lesson 2 teaches you how to manage yourself to become that dream person and to have that open mind and all the things you wish you had in someone else. Lesson 9, don't get your feathers wet. That's all about the importance of understanding not to take things personally and to look at the challenges of human growth and development and how to have a healthy perspective so you don't let yourself get broken unnecessarily or beat up in relationships just by being more wise as to what's going on in all relationships. Number 11 is communication skills, where I share the SMART acronym and how to apply that. And then lesson 12, one of my favorite and most powerful lessons, is sacred listening. So hopefully those resources will help you. I hope you enjoyed my presentation today. I know it's quite a mature presentation for a lot of the people that watch my YouTube channels, but as I said, there's nothing like awareness. So if someone tells you that there's a storm and trees are falling on the road, it's a good time to put your joints and beer away and pay close attention. And in this case, it's a good time to pay attention to what it means to have a friendship and a relationship on the way to intimacy, and be clear about what intimacy means no matter what stage you're at and what the expectations are, so you don't end up with problems that could not only be yours and theirs for a lifelong journey, but for a child. So thanks for joining me today. I look forward to sharing something with you soon.